Hey guys, thanks for watching. Today I'm going to share a story with you that I hope will inspire you and encourage you and give you hope for whatever it is in your life that God has put on your heart, whatever passions He's put on your heart, and it will give you the motivation to move forward with that without so much fear. We took a trip to Florida in 2000. So, gosh, it's been 24 years ago. And what we had planned to do is we were planning to relocate. My husband was a pilot by trade, and we were researching Florida for a year. It was before the internet days, and we chose to we researched different towns, and we were really looking at Vero Beach, and we chose to get a newspaper from Vero Beach, and we did that for a year. And we made our plans and did research and just started watching that and started planning our relocation. Oh, just to let you know, we lived in Southern Oregon at the time, and we wanted him to pursue his career as a pilot and become a flight instructor so he could build up hours. And Florida's a great place to do that because, ironically, the weather is better there. So anyway, let's see. So we left late September 2000 and picked up and moved. Like I said, it was a plan. We got rid of almost everything. We took our 3 kids. Our son was age 4. Our next one down, daughter, was age 2, and our next one down was age about 14 months. So actually no, I think our middle one was about 2.5, so because they're 2 years apart. So anyway, so we took off and planned to move. Hindsight, it's always would have been helpful. I'm sure that we would have done things different had we known what we know now. But anyway, regardless, that's what we did. So I'm just going to look a little bit on my paper to remind me of how it all went down. So let's see. We planned to take the northern route because of the weather, and we decided to take see some different places. We went to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and visited some friends in Montana. Went and saw the big dinosaur museum. We went through Wyoming. Went to the Devil's Tower. We drove through Sturgis. Went to South Dakota, went and saw Mount Rushmore. So we really made it a fun family trip, even though the kids were very, very young. They really I don't believe they remember much of it. Ultimately, we were on the road, just to give you an idea, we were on the road for about 5 weeks. So let's see, we saw the Badlands, flatlands of South Dakota, Badlands National Park, stayed with some friends in St. Paul, went to Lincoln's birthplace, and let's see, anyway, we arrived in Savannah, Georgia at night, and let's see, let me put this on hold for a second. So we arrived at St. Augustine in Florida, and that night my husband was almost mugged. He went down to grab our phone at the time that we had, and a guy tried to get him to go behind the building to sell him things. It was quite scary. So anyway, that kind of started the minute we got to Florida. It was a little rougher than we had anticipated. I'm from Hawaii originally, and we were kind of thinking towards that, and then it would be, super, beautiful like that. And that was our first experience there. Let's see, next day we continued on to Daytona Beach, and my husband visited Embry-Riddle Flight School. He had some interviews planned at the flight school in Vero Beach, but we also checked out some flight schools on the way as well. So anyway, so we spent several days in Vero Beach. He spent time at the flight school there. We looked at rentals in Vero Beach. They were more spendy than we had anticipated, and the areas that we could afford were a little bit not quite as nice as we had hoped for. anyway, but so after several days spending time in Vero Beach, we decided to check out the Gulf Coast of Florida. So we went and spent an evening in Sanibel Island, which was absolutely beautiful. Loved it. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then we went on to Venice, and we spent several days in Venice. We absolutely loved Venice. There was a beautiful apartment complex just like a block from the beach, and it was so pretty. And the flight school that he interviewed at and they offered him a position was right by the beach as well. And we just loved it. We really loved it, and they liked him. He had an interview. It went great. He was introduced to a lot of people at the flight school. Some students there that he had remembered specifically, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. But anyway, so we looked for an apartment. Spent some time there. He got a letter of reference saying that he had been hired there for when we got our apartment. And this one particular apartment that we went to, keep in mind we had toddlers at the time, as we're pulling in, an alligator went into the pond. So the apartments there, the apartment buildings there, they have, the pools are fenced, however the ponds are not. So I thought that was odd, and the lady told me that they were very excited that they had a resident alligator there. As she told me, we just needed to be careful with our toddlers during mating season because they could run very fast on land. So needless to say that there were certain things that started making us feel a little bit leery. So let's see. So at a certain point, as we were apartment hunting, we found out that he was only going to get part-time, and at that point in time in our lives, we felt that we needed to keep me home with our very young kids and have him do the work, so go to work. So we were concerned about that, and we started kind of getting more concerned as time went by that if he was only going to get part-time, he would need to find a second job, or I would need to find a second job. So we were starting to really just have a lot of red flags, I guess, in our mind. So at that point, we went and took a quick trip over to Titusville. I cannot remember how close that is to Vero Beach, but or to Venice Beach. But anyway, in Titusville, we made a decision that we were not going to stay in Florida, and so then we started to kind of make our plan to move on back towards Oregon. So when we made the decision to go back home, it was around Halloween, because I remember the 31st, and I think we went the next day. We decided to go to Kennedy Space Center, which I'm really grateful that we took the time to see these places, because it ended up being more like a very stressful extended vacation when all is said and done, and a huge learning experience as well. So when we drove home, we drove on the Gulf side this time. We went through Florida, Alabama, loved Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, stopped at an all-you-can-eat place in Texas and tried alligator. That was good and interesting. So we went through San Antonio and then got on to Highway 10. We stayed the night in Tucson. Then went up to Prescott, and my husband went and looked at Amarillo Flight School as well. And we went through Quartzsite, Arizona, where everybody's camping. Drove past Palm Springs, went to Cabazon, and saw huge giant dinosaur statues. I don't know if any of you have ever seen those, but they're pretty cool to look at. And we cut northwest and went on the back side of the mountain and past Lancaster, California. Then we cut over to I-5. We drove all the way north up to Fairfield, California, which was where my grandparents lived at the time. That was a 16-hour drive. Whew. I do not recommend doing that with little kids, but regardless, we made it back into California, spent several days with my grandparents. Then we continued on back to Southern Oregon. So yeah, it was pretty stressful at the end when we decided to come back. I have to be honest, both of us, I think, were really dealing with some pretty huge amount of depression and frustration, anxiety, just all of it. We had to stay with relatives for a few days, and then we ended up staying with some friends after that for 3 months while we got back on our feet. And my husband got a job, and then we got back into an apartment. And before we moved out of our friend's house, he and our friend's husband took a trip down to the southwest and took a look at one other flight school that had offered my husband a job. And he decided it was very low pay, and they had terrible safety conditions with the airplane. It didn't have a light. They told him not to worry about it, all this stuff. So that did not go well. But anyway, regardless, that's what he did. So then when he came back, then he got a job. It wasn't a flying job, but he got a job, and we got back on our feet eventually. So it took some time to recover from this experience. I mean, I have to be honest, I'm sure it's triggering to some of you, because when people go through this, it's no small matter. I mean, it's life altering. It really is. We had a lot of questions, a lot of what ifs. Had we made the right choice going back to Oregon? Did we give up our dream, going to Florida and the highway capital of the world for flying, or were we meant to be in Florida, or were we meant to be in Oregon? It's kind of a scary thing when you're not sure if the choice that you made was right. So fast forward to September 2001. The United States was under attack by terrorists. I'm sure most of you, well, anyone who remembers it takes my breath away to think of the memory. I remember I was with my kids, and we were sitting there watching TV, and just mind-blowing how horrible it was during that time. So as the Americans were grieving a great loss and devastation, more information came in. Well, the names of the terrorists as they came up, and the flight schools of the terrorists where they had trained. There were two names in particular, and a flight school where they trained, and it was actually the flight school in Vero Beach where my husband was planning to work. And needless to say, we were just shocked. My husband remembers meeting them, the flight school. They were students at the time, and he remembers meeting them. My husband's not a dramatic person. He has a good memory, and he's like, Lauren, I remember those men. And we realized at that point that God did have a bigger plan than what we had, that it didn't include, not that it, of course it wasn't planned for that to happen, and God didn't want that to happen, but what I'm getting at is that for us, it would have not been good if my husband had been there, possibly training those guys. So it really opened our eyes to God had a better plan for us. So fast forward to 2021, when my husband retired, and we took a 5,000-mile trip to relocate. We knew that we wanted to move to a safer, a better place than where we had been raising, I should say a safer place. There's plenty of wonderful people in Oregon, but we wanted to raise our kids in a safer environment than the way Oregon was turning out. So we took a 5,000-mile trip, and my husband wanted to show me this place that he had looked at with our friend 21 years before, and he showed it to me, and we knew it was where we were supposed to be. And so we went home, took time to sell our house. My daughter ended up getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in the process, so we took the trip in April. We moved here in December 23rd of 2021. So yeah, so that, I look back at that, and I'm like, God knew it wasn't the right time for us to move. We had more things that we needed to be doing in Oregon, and He knew the timing wasn't right. And so I'm grateful for that. And so I just want to encourage you that we don't always know why God allows us to go through things. I mean, that trip was, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how stressful it was at the time. and disappointing in the end to turn around and go all the way back home. But in our situation, we actually did. I think oftentimes you don't get to find out why, but in our situation, we did get to find out the whys. It also strengthened our marriage. I'm sure that some people might not do that too, but for us it did. And so I would just encourage you that if you have something that God's put in your heart, if you have a fire in your heart to do something, whether it's changing your career, relocating, or whatever it might be, pray over it, seek God, seek counsel, do your research. Don't be afraid of failure. Do not be afraid of failure. Failure is failure is just a step towards your ultimate goal and towards a step towards success. So many people would have viewed our situation as a failure, but we chose not to. It was hard, it took time, it took a lot of processing, a lot of praying, but we decided not to view it as a failure. So I just want to encourage you, don't be afraid of failure. It's part of the process. And whatever it is that God's putting in your heart and that you're feeling passionate about, go for it and do it. With prayer, of course, and lots of research. Would we change things? Yeah. We changed a few things how we did it, but honestly, I'm glad we did it the way we did it. And ultimately, we got to our destination, and it's in the end, it was all quite an adventure. So thanks for listening. Good luck to whatever it is that you're doing, and we'll see you next time.